The hotel ballroom in Addis Ababa didn't feel like a room, it felt like a pressure chamber. Crystal chandeliers hummed above a sea of suits, translators, and curious cameras. Behind frosted doors, 2 security details stood in a tense mirror, Secret Service in quiet formation on one side, Burkina's plainclothes guardians on the other. Inside, a small round table with 2 chairs waited like a referee about to call a fight. Barack Obama entered first, measured and deliberate, the careful smile of a man who had negotiated with the world's hardest edges. Ibrahim Traoré walked in moments later, posture steady, eyes bright, not defiant, but unafraid in a way that made defiance unnecessary. No papers. No aides. No teleprompters. Just 2 men and the weight of history between them. "Captain," Obama said, extending a hand with a diplomat's precision. "Mr. President," Traoré returned, gripping with a soldier's certainty. They sat. Silence moved in. A camera light blinked red, then faded. This was off the record. The real conversation always is. Obama started with the velvet tone that made the world lean in. "We both want stability," he said. "But there are ways to move that don't set the region on fire." Traoré didn't blink. "Stability," he echoed, "is what the powerful call it when the poor don't complain." Obama's smile thinned. "Young leaders sometimes mistake speed for strength. Careful. This game plays longer than a headline." Traoré leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice low enough to force listening. "And old systems sometimes mistake patience for progress. Careful, people are running out of both." The air tightened. 2 philosophies, 1 table. Obama's eyes narrowed just a fraction, the way they had before he signed orders no one would ever read on TV. "Don't test me," he whispered, not loud, not threatening, just final, the way a locked door is final. Traoré held the gaze, unflinching. "I just did." A pulse of silence, heavy, electric, rolled through the room. Somewhere beyond the doors, a reporter rehearsed his stand-up. Somewhere in Washington, a draft statement waited for the right verbs. In Ouagadougou, farmers checked the sky and prayed for honest rain. And in this small, quiet space, 2 timelines collided, the one the world knew, and the one it feared might be coming. Traoré straightened. "I'm not here to be welcomed into your order," he said. "I'm here to end the parts of it that feed on us." Obama steepled his fingers. "And I'm here to keep the world from tearing itself apart while you do." Between them lay a map of Africa that neither could see but both could feel, gold seams and oil fields, ports and pipelines, treaties written in respectable fonts that hid indecent terms. The chandeliers hummed louder. The door handles didn't move. Outside, the continent spun as usual. Inside, the future changed its posture. The room felt colder after Traoré's reply, and Obama's faint smile disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. He leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, trying to project the calm authority he once commanded so effortlessly. But Traoré wasn't another head of state seeking approval, nor a politician begging for a seat at Washington's table. He was a soldier, one who had buried empires without firing a bullet. And Obama could feel it. "Testing me," Obama finally said, lowering his voice to that smooth, practiced tone millions remembered from his speeches, "has consequences. The world still listens to us. And they will listen when I say you're destabilizing Africa." Traoré didn't even blink. "Destabilizing?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the shadows behind him forming the silhouette of a continent. "Africa was destabilized long before I picked up a microphone. Maybe ask the ones who drew borders with rulers and blood." A small group of aides shifted nervously behind Obama, exchanging worried glances. This wasn't how these conversations usually went. Leaders typically folded, softened, or wrapped their answers in diplomacy. But Traoré was pressing back, direct, sharp, unapologetic. Obama sighed, shaking his head. "You're young. You're angry. And history will swallow men like you if they move too fast." Traoré's eyes hardened. "History swallowed men like me because they moved too slow." For a moment, the silence stretched. And in that silence, the balance of power shifted, not toward the United States, not toward the old world order, but toward the single man across the table who didn't fear it. "You think you're the exception," Obama said quietly. "They all do." Traoré gave a faint, almost amused smile. "No. I think I'm the correction." The words hit harder than a threat, harder than any diplomatic warning. Obama's expression tightened, his jaw locking the way it does when a calculated message fails to hit its target. Traoré stood, adjusting his uniform with a calmness that felt like defiance itself. "You warned me not to test you," he said, "but I think the real test is whether you're ready for a world you no longer control." He took a step toward the door, pausing just long enough to let the weight of his words settle. "Don't follow old maps, Mr. Obama," Traoré said without turning back. "They don't work in a world that's no longer yours." Obama's eyes narrowed, the kind of look Washington elites had spent years learning to fear but never admit. He leaned back slightly, trying to reclaim the authority that had just slipped through his fingers. But Traoré didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply existed, calm, unshaken, immovable. And that terrified everyone more than any military parade or speech ever could. "President Traoré," Obama began, voice low, steady, almost rehearsed, "there are limits. Lines. Rules that keep nations from falling into chaos." Traoré's jaw tightened just enough to signal he'd heard this speech 1,000 times before, from colonizers, presidents, diplomats, and the many men who spent decades believing Africa was a continent of children needing instruction. "Chaos?" Traoré said, his tone razor clean. "Africa has lived through the chaos you built. And we're still standing." The room stirred, coughs, shifting suits, nervous glances. Even the American advisors behind Obama exchanged quick looks, silently debating whether to intervene or let Obama take the hit alone. Obama tried again. "You're playing a dangerous game. Challenging the global order isn't bravery, it's recklessness." Traoré leaned in, not aggressively, not theatrically, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to lose. "I'm not challenging a system," he said. "I'm exposing one." A ripple moved across the table. Someone whispered. Another pretended not to be impressed. Obama's lips pressed thin. He hated losing the room, especially to a young African captain the West had dismissed for years as inexperienced. "You think you understand the game?" Obama asked. Traoré didn't smile. "I understand the game because Africa has paid the price of every round you played." That line hit harder than anyone expected. The American delegates froze. The African representatives lifted their chins. And Obama, once the symbol of global authority, finally showed a flicker of uncertainty. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was acknowledgement. Traoré had just made the world's most polished negotiator hesitate. And in diplomacy, hesitation is defeat. Obama's eyes narrowed, the kind of stare Washington elites used when they believed they were still the most powerful people in any room. But Traoré didn't blink. He didn't shift, didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the quiet threat lingering in Obama's whisper. Instead, he held his gaze, steady, unbothered, almost amused, like a man who had seen real battles, not just political ones. "General," Obama said, lowering his voice, "you're playing a dangerous game. You're walking into a system built long before you were born." Traoré leaned back slightly, a half-smile forming, the kind he wore right before he dismantled someone's confidence. "Mr. President," he replied calmly, "your system was built to keep men like me silent. I don't play inside cages." Obama exhaled sharply. "You're not listening. Power in this world works through alliances, ours. You challenge us, and you isolate yourself." Now Traoré actually laughed. Not loudly. Not mockingly. A quiet, sharp laugh that said more than any speech. "Isolate myself," he repeated. "Africa isn't an island. It's a continent awakening. And you're afraid of what happens when we stop asking permission." A flash of irritation crossed Obama's face. For a moment, the polished diplomatic tone cracked, revealing something raw beneath it: fear, frustration, maybe even disbelief that someone dared to talk to him like this. "You're too bold," Obama murmured. Traoré's expression hardened just enough to send a chill through the room. "No," he answered. "I'm just the first African leader who stopped acting like your employee." Silence filled the air. The diplomatic staff in the background shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in power. Every word Traoré spoke landed like a nail sealing a coffin, calm, precise, devastating. Obama straightened himself, trying to reclaim authority. "Boldness without caution destroys nations. And caution without courage," Traoré replied, "keeps them enslaved." For the first time, Obama had no immediate comeback. His jaw tightened, his fingers twitched. He looked at Traoré the way a chess master looks at a player who suddenly flipped the board and walked away with the victory anyway. Traoré stood, adjusting his uniform with the serenity of a man who answered to no empire. "You whispered, 'Don't test me,'" he said. "But I did. And you failed." He walked toward the exit without waiting for permission, because he didn't need any. Obama leaned back in his chair, the tension in the room suddenly thick. He hadn't expected Traoré to fire back so quickly, so cleanly, so fearlessly. The former U.S. president had faced dictators, rebels, and world-class negotiators, but there was something different about the Burkinabe soldier sitting across from him. Traoré didn't posture. He didn't bluff. He didn't hide behind carefully polished diplomatic language. He simply told the truth, and the truth carried more weight than any threat Obama could muster. The small group of U.S. advisors sitting behind Obama shifted uncomfortably. Their notes, their reports, their talking points, none of it mattered against Traoré's raw confidence. The man wasn't acting like a guest in Washington, he was acting like someone who understood his power, someone who didn't need America's approval, someone who could not be intimidated by whispered warnings. Obama cleared his throat. "You're young," he said carefully. "You haven't learned how the world works yet." Traoré's eyes narrowed. "No," he replied. "I just refuse to accept a world built on fear." Obama's jaw tightened. It was the first time the American Titan looked cornered. "You think standing up to us makes you strong?" Obama said, voice dropping to a low, steady rhythm. "Power isn't about shouting. It's about surviving the consequences." Traoré leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Africa has survived yours for centuries." Silence hit the room like a thunderclap. Even Obama couldn't hide the flicker in his eyes. Surprise mixed with something else. Respect? Annoyance? Maybe fear. "You're playing a dangerous game," Obama finally said. Traoré didn't blink. "No," he answered. "I'm ending one." The American delegation froze. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was a reckoning. The room fell into a tense silence the moment Traoré turned his head toward Obama. It wasn't anger in his eyes, anger would have been too soft, too human for what he felt. What Obama saw was something far more unsettling, the calm certainty of a man who feared nothing, not even the legacy of an American president. And that was precisely why Obama's voice had trembled when he whispered, "Don't test me." It was the voice of a man who suddenly realized the world was no longer arranged the way he remembered. Traoré took a slow step forward, the sound of his boots echoing like a countdown across the hallway. "You think you've been tested," he said, his tone steady, almost conversational. "You signed papers. I buried men." The words hit harder than a shout ever could. Obama's posture stiffened, shoulders tightening with a reflex he tried, and failed, to hide. A few aides in the room exchanged anxious glances. Cameras continued rolling, every lens drawn to the contrast between Obama's calculated poise and Traoré's raw, unfiltered dominance. The younger leader wasn't speaking to win approval. He wasn't performing. He was simply telling the truth, and that made it even more devastating. "You talk about stability," Traoré continued, "but your stability cost Africa decades of stolen futures. Every time we tried to rise, someone like you told us to wait. To obey, to stay where we were placed." He leaned in just slightly, enough to force Obama to hold eye contact or look weak. Obama didn't look away, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. "And now?" Traoré said softly. Now you whisper warnings. Now you tell me not to test you. He paused, letting the moment stretch until every listener forgot to breathe. But I already did. And you failed. A murmur rippled across the room, shock, disbelief, and something else, recognition. Recognition that global power was shifting right in front of them, and Obama, the symbol of American confidence, was no longer the axis around which the conversation rotated. Traoré straightened up, adjusting his cuffs as if brushing off dust from a battlefield. Africa doesn't fear your system anymore, he said. Because the system fears men like me. Obama swallowed, and for the first time since entering office years ago, he looked uncertain. Not defeated, not broken, but confronted by a reality he could no longer shape with speeches, charm, or strategy. This wasn't the old world. And Traoré wasn't the kind of leader who left room for negotiation where dignity was involved. With every passing second, it was becoming clearer. Obama had whispered a warning. Traoré had delivered a verdict. The room had never been quieter, not during wars, not during sanctions, not during the fall of governments. But after Traoré's last words, it felt as if even the air stopped breathing. Obama stood still, jaw locked, eyes searching for an angle, a foothold, anything that could pull him back into control. But Traoré had taken the ground from beneath him, and everyone in the room knew it. Obama finally forced a smile. Courage is admirable, he said, voice low, smooth, deliberate. Recklessness? Not so much. You don't know the forces you're provoking. It was supposed to sound like wisdom. Instead, it sounded like fear trying to disguise itself. Traoré didn't blink. What I know, he said, is that Africa has been provoked for centuries. And when we answer, suddenly everyone calls it reckless. He stepped closer, not aggressive, simply present, immovable. You're not warning me. You're warning yourself. A murmur spread across the hall. Diplomats, generals, analysts, none of them could decide whether to intervene or take notes for history books. Obama's nostrils flared. Be careful, Captain. You're walking into storms bigger than you. Traoré tilted his head, unfazed. Storms don't scare people who've survived droughts, coups, and foreign puppets. Africa was shaped in fire. You think I'm alone here? He pointed at the African delegation, but then at something deeper, at the cameras broadcasting to millions. My people are watching. And they're tired of being told who to fear. Obama's voice sharpened. You think the world will follow you? Traoré answered instantly. No. But they'll follow the truth. And that scares you more than any army I could build. The silence that followed wasn't like before. This one had weight. Obama stepped back, not noticeably, but enough for everyone to see it. Enough for headlines. Enough for history. A journalist whispered, did he just retreat? Another replied, no. He just realized he already lost. Traoré remained exactly where he was, still, steady, defiant. I didn't come here to test you, he said softly. I came here to end the illusion that you cannot be tested. Obama swallowed hard. And for the first time in his political life, he looked like a man who didn't have an answer. The room felt colder the moment Obama straightened his back, as if trying to reclaim the authority he once carried effortlessly. Cameras clicked, advisors pretended not to panic, and every diplomat in the hall pretended to read their notes. Anything to avoid making eye contact with the two men now locked in a duel of presence, not power. Obama spoke first, voice carefully measured. You're pushing too far, Traoré. You think challenging me proves something? Traoré didn't move. Didn't blink. It already proved something, he said calmly. You felt the need to warn me. A faint tremor crossed Obama's jawline. It wasn't fear, at least not the kind he would ever admit. It was irritation, the realization that he had misjudged the man in front of him. He had expected a predictable African leader, someone who would bow slightly, talk politely, and retreat quietly. He did not expect a soldier who spoke like a man with nothing left to lose, and nothing left to obey. Obama tried again. When you act like this, you isolate yourself. You make enemies in every direction. Traoré took a single step closer, and the entire U.S. security detail shifted. Enemies? He said, voice low but razor-sharp. I was born surrounded by them. I fought them before your country ever learned my name. Don't speak to me as if danger is new. Where I come from, danger is breakfast. Someone in the back gasped softly. Obama crossed his arms, a defensive gesture he tried to mask as patience. You don't understand how the world works. Traoré tilted his head. The world, he repeated. Your world, maybe. The one where Africa listens quietly while you decide our future. That world is gone. I buried it myself. It was bold. It was fearless. And worst of all for Obama, it was true. A U.S. advisor whispered urgently, Sir, maybe we should move this conversation to a private. Obama raised a hand. No, then to Traoré, you're making a mistake. Traoré's reply landed like a hammer. The only mistake Africa made was believing the system couldn't be challenged. I am challenging it. And you're realizing you can't stop me. Every camera in the room zoomed in. Every journalist leaned forward. For the first time in his political life, Barack Obama had no comeback. Traoré didn't gloat. He simply delivered the final blow, quiet and lethal. You whispered, don't test me. I tested you. And you broke first. The hall erupted, not in sound, but in the heavy silence of a world witnessing the shift of power. The room felt colder when Traoré stepped back toward Obama, closing the distance the former president had hoped to maintain. Cameras zoomed in, diplomats held their breath, and for a moment, even the translators forgot to translate. What came next wasn't diplomacy. It was confrontation sharpened into truth. Obama tried to reclaim control, clearing his throat, lifting his chin as if the posture alone could restore the hierarchy he'd lost. Captain Traoré, he said slowly, there are global structures at play here. Systems that existed long before you arrived, and systems that will remain long after. But Traoré didn't even blink. Systems built on African backs, he replied. Systems that collapse the second we stop carrying them. Obama's jaw tightened. This was not the response he expected, not from an African leader, not from someone young, unapologetic, and unwilling to play the script Washington wrote decades ago. You're pushing your luck, Obama murmured. Traoré stepped even closer. No. I'm pushing truth. And truth scares you more than any army. A whisper rippled through the delegates, shock, disbelief, admiration. Even those who disliked Traoré felt the power behind his words. It wasn't bravado. It was memory, of colonization, of coups engineered by foreign hands, of leaders destroyed for refusing to bow. Obama attempted a soft smile, the one he used to disarm crowds. Be careful. A single misstep on the world stage can undo everything you're trying to build. Traoré's answer landed like a hammer. Africa has already paid the price for everyone else's missteps. Now it's your turn to watch your own. Obama's expression froze. He knew exactly what Traoré meant, Burkina Faso's alliances shifting, African nations choosing sovereignty over dependency, leaders refusing the strings the West had pulled for generations. You think you can challenge us, Obama said quietly. Traoré nodded. I already did. And look around, no one is stopping me. Every delegate turned toward him then. Not as a young captain, not as someone the West underestimated, but as the symbol of something shifting. Something Washington and Paris could no longer contain. Obama stepped back. Just an inch. But the world saw it. And Traoré saw it too. "Don't test me," Obama had whispered. "I just did," Traoré answered. And the echo of that sentence traveled farther than any speech that day. The moment Obama realized Traoré wouldn't back down, the entire room shifted. Advisors froze, cameras zoomed in, and even the Secret Service seemed unsure whether they were witnessing a diplomatic exchange or the start of a political earthquake. Obama leaned forward, lowering his voice to a growl meant only for Traoré. "If you keep pushing like this, you'll stand alone." But Traoré didn't flinch, he didn't even blink. Instead, he stood taller, as if the pressure only sharpened him. He tilted his head, almost amused, and answered loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "Alone? I walk with 1 billion Africans. You're the one standing alone." The room erupted, not in noise, but in pure tension. You could feel the air tighten, like lightning trapped before a storm. Obama tried to recover, giving a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You really think you can challenge the world order?" he asked, trying to bring the tone back under control. Traoré stepped closer, not threatening, but unstoppable, as if he carried something larger than himself. "I'm not challenging the world order," he said. "I'm replacing it." The words thundered without needing volume. They echoed in the silence that followed. Obama exhaled sharply, realizing Traoré wasn't bluffing. This wasn't another politician seeking validation. This was a soldier who had survived real battlefields, a leader shaped by blood and consequence, not by speeches, donors, or committees. "You don't understand the powers you're provoking," Obama warned. Traoré only smiled. "I understand enough," he replied. "Enough to know that men hiding behind power fear those who don't." A murmur spread through the hall. Even Obama's closest allies looked shaken. Because deep down, they all knew Traoré wasn't talking like a president. He was talking like history itself, like someone who came to redraw lines, not follow them. Obama finally leaned back, defeated not by force but by conviction. And Traoré delivered the final blow, calmly, like a verdict. "You told me not to test you," he said. "I did. And you failed." The room didn't just freeze, it bowed.